This week on the podcast, I'm thrilled to have Julie Chavez. Julie is an elementary school librarian in Northern California. Though thousands of books pass through her hands each month, Everyone But Myself is the first one written by her. Julie lives with her husband and two tall teenagers in a house where she arranges her books by color. Julie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I have to tell you that you very kindly emailed this question to me so that I would know what we were doing. But what was funny is I printed out the email before I looked at it. I picked it up and I just started laughing because the answer to your question is everything. I wanted to be a backup dancer. I wanted to be a backup singer. I wanted to be a lawyer. I did actually really, as I was kind of getting along in school, I was on the track to become an obstetrician. So that was sort of the direction I was going. But even still, stunt driver, that's one that comes up for me a lot every time I watch Transformers. And I mean, you'll notice I'm using present tense also. Like I still harbor dreams of being a stunt driver, even though my kids and husband are like, that's a horrible idea. You backed into a tree. This is not. But mostly I would say as things came, definitely delivering babies was what I wanted to do, being a doctor.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think all of that connects to what you do today?
That's such a good question. I think that what's fun is that I have just started working on a novel. So I have a memoir that is about to be out, but I just started working on a novel. And the character in the novel is a cover designer, which is also one of the jobs I would like to do. And so I think it's going to start to relate because I love hearing about people's lives and exploring what they do and the ins and outs of their careers, because I think every career and every job has so many little intricacies and so many stories embedded in it, right? Like your weird coworkers and then also these random things that you have to do that people wouldn't expect. And that's true of every position. So I think now I'll be writing about them. So it did kind of lead me to think, well, maybe I'll just write a book with a character who delivers babies and I can use it that way. So yeah, I think that's probably how it is. I think that because I was always a person with a big imagination, that's kind of brought me to where I am, sort of open to possibility, I think.
And so you said you wanted to deliver babies. You also, yes. I kind of sensed you wanted to be on a stage maybe as a kid.
Totally. I still just dream of really fame for no reason. So yes.
You're on your way.
Perfect.
Did you follow that through at any point? Were you on medical school track and then deviated? Tell us about how you got to writing Everyone But Myself.
Yes, I would love to. Because I love stories about people whose lives are kind of deviating from the path. I tend to be a really linear person. I'm trying not to be a perfectionist, but let's be honest, I'm 44. I'm probably stuck with it. So I just have to accept that this is the way I'm going to view the world. But I think that there are so many small turns. I was always a person that wanted to have this career, I think, was the way that I saw it. And that would have been a measure of success for me. That it was, I started here, I went to school, and it had a very tidy little trajectory. And mine has been like a pinball machine. I mean, I'm all over the map. So in college, I was on a pre-med track. I was a Spanish major in college, but that was a function of the fact that I had the most credits in Spanish when I got to college. So I was like, perfect, that'll be my major. I mean, you'll see, it's funny because my son is going through the process now or about to and said something about a major. And I just think, man, I just had no idea. I didn't know anything about what I wanted to do. But at the time, they encouraged people that were looking at medical school to have a major that was not a science. So it was kind of perfect. So I started taking all the science classes. I took anatomy with a cadaver lab. So
wow.
I did a lot of the science. I took everything but organic chemistry because toward the end, I had met my now husband and I had a bit of a closed mindset about what our life could hold in terms of the life of a doctor and especially an obstetrician. That's stressful and very unpredictable. And because I think I was looking at predictability and he had been recruited by a company and we were going to be moving. And so it sort of, I slowly stepped away from that track. I don't regret it, but there are times where I think, what if I had gone that direction? How would our life look? I'm always fascinated by the road not taken. So,
me too.
right?
I love those type of movies
Yes. Yes. I'm thinking even, did you see About Time? Rachel McAdams was in it.
Yeah. Is that the one with the redheaded?
Yes.
Yes,
I was
I did.
going to
Of
say
course.
the actor, but I
don't
can't
know
remember his name.
I don't know.
Yes. But like that movie or Sliding Doors. Yep. I'm with you.
There's
good.
a musical that we watched years ago that we had also kind of like these two lives that I loved it.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to need you to find that for me. Okay. You have it on your to-do list for today. You can email it to me. I know what I'm doing. Yeah. I love those stories just because we like to think of our lives as, I think there's a fixedness in our minds, but things turn on a dime, right? Like
just one decision can change the trajectory of our life.
Exactly. And I love that thought. So Mondo had started his career. So we moved to Portland. We were there for a few years. I worked in a school as a translator and ESL educator. I was an assistant. So I did that for a while. I worked at Chipotle for a while. I decided I was going to love Chipotle. Shout out. Thank you for your chips. I love them. I mean, we still eat there. My kids had it last night for dinner. So I was at Chipotle for a while. I've had such a series of random jobs. I worked in the catering department at a hotel. My dad is in the hotel business, so I've had plenty of hotel jobs. I've waited tables. I've done all these random things. And then some of this was really geared around, I knew I wanted to stay at home with my kids. And that was a very important thing that I wanted. It was what I grew up with. And a lot of that was based on my dad's job. His job demanded a lot. And so my mom was really the constant. And we also moved quite a bit. So I think I had that model of like, okay, this is the value that I will bring to our family. And for 10 years, I did that. I still love those years. And they are a gift and a treasure to me. I think, though, that what I've realized now on the other side of the book, and I'll explain it a little bit, but I think that I didn't realize that there was still space for my ambition there. I had really pushed a lot of that aside, and no one's fault but my own. I'm very thankful that I had options, but I think I saw that as incompatible with the type of mom I wanted to be. But what's interesting is that after 10 years, I started volunteering, went back to the library, put 30 hours of work onto my stay-at-home mom job, which has quite a bit to it. As any person, parent,
the hardest job in the
stays
world.
At home. Oh my gosh.
The hardest job in the world.
The complexity and flexibility and ingenuity that is required of any primary parent is second to none. You're constantly in flux, right?
And thankless too. It's not there's no appreciation. There's no performance evaluation at the end to tell you good job.
Correct. The hardest, most thankless, unpaid job you will ever have. And also the most wonderful, which makes it really weird, right?
Yes,
because it's that equal parts of like, I love these kids. And if you don't go to bed, I'm going to lose my mind. So I think just this whole combination of things. So my husband was traveling at the time. I go back to the library. I put 30 hours on top of this. And the only thing that can go and can give in this situation is me and my needs. So I set all that aside and I stopped feeling my feelings and I stopped saying when things were hard. And I had a very scary immunotherapy experience and I didn't take time to process that. And so I really slowly though I didn't realize it, I was backing myself into a corner where I was afraid of change. I was afraid of things happening out of my control. And I was afraid of losing my connection with my husband or my kids. And so that fear became outsized and then eventually led to my first panic attack, which was at the age of 38. So that's sort of the beginnings of this story. But what's interesting is that that is what led me to the book. And what's amazing is that the book opens with, on the night I had the first panic attack, I slept with the lights on. Mondo was out of town and I was alone and I could not turn out the lights. And that was such a scary, horrible time. And I went from that and bottoming out on Mother's Day and just having the hardest time of my life in terms of knowing who I was and feeling so disconnected to myself, to now where this book is a dream come true. And now I have parts of my life where there is space for me to have ambition and dreams. And that's wonderful and healthy for my kids to see. So I think all this to say, I've had this winding path. I'm thankful for every bit of it. And I think it's gotten me to where I am. I think my only advice to my former self would be, no, there's still space for you in your life. right?
Mm.
That you can not have it all. That's ridiculousness. And I hate that phrase very deeply. But I think this idea that I can have a life with space for me, and that can be a beautiful, connected life, that I shouldn't be more, but I shouldn't be less. So that was a very long answer to your question.
It was beautiful. And I can even hear your emotion as you talk about creating space.
It's something I think about every single day. And it is the thing that I'm most grateful for about the time I write about in the book. There's nothing worse for me than not feeling like I can hear the sound of my own voice. And that was a time in which I couldn't do that. So for me to be able to ask myself, gosh, what would I like to do with this time? I want to work on a puzzle. I want to do something that just makes me happy only because it makes me happy. I want to start working on a novel. These are the things, but just having a place where you can ask yourself those questions. And I think what I love about your podcast, and I've been listening to a few of the episodes, is that it leaves a lot of space for possibility, because everyone is kind of finding their way to where they're meant to be. So I would love for someone to listen to this and think, wow, that's a really messy path. And mine could be too. That if we're lucky, life is long and we can explore other paths. Even if we've gone down one for a while, we can still back it up or jump tracks. And that's a gift.
And that somehow it all kind of connects, that it all kind of makes sense looking back.
It 1,000,000% does. It's so much tidier looking back, right?
Yeah.
And that is such a comforting thought to me, though, where especially as a perfectionist who wants to do it right and wants to do it in a straight line, for me to say, wow, it was perfect in that zigzag line. Jig-tag. Is that even a word? No. Zigzag line. Jeez. Are you a writer, Julie? So yeah, to see the perfection in it. And I've seen some graphs when we think about growth kind of going this way, but then the idea that it's more like this. You're moving in a direction, but you are up and down on that line for the entire time, and seeing that as more of a way that things can move. I'm looking at the music notes behind you. It's very much a similar metaphor, right? Like the dissonance and everything comes together at a certain point and you think, oh, now it works.
It makes sense.
It makes sense.
And I want to like double click on that space that you said, okay, you had the panic attack, that there was all those things going on, and then it led you to writing the book.
Okay.
And can we talk about that middle part, right? So how did you go from that space where you didn't have space for yourself? You had your first panic attack. How did you go from there to writing that book? Because I heard you say, I was afraid of change.
Oh my. Yes, there is so much to unpack here. And I love that you're asking about that. I was very afraid of change. Basically, I had gotten to the point, my therapist at the time called it a mid-mom crisis. So when you stay at home with your kids.
It's my first time hearing that one.
Right? And it's, man, I have shared it with so many people since then. And when she said it at the time, because I said, I think I'm having a midlife crisis. And she said, well, you're a little young for that, because I was 38 at the time. But she said, I think you might be having a mid-mom crisis because your kids are getting older. And that can be really disorienting. I know a lot of people feel it when their kids go to college. I think it was earlier for me because I was starting to work, and I have 2 sons and their independence was really growing. And one was about to go to middle school. And I just had a lot of fear around, what if the best days are behind us? What if now it's all going to fall apart from here? And I think also because I'm a creative, I was very good at envisioning worst case scenarios. And that is not a healthy mental practice, just as a side note for everyone to bookmark. It's not a good way to use your time. But what I was doing was I was spending so much time in these sort of imagined futures, and I wasn't realizing that I was, like I said, backing myself into a corner slowly because I was starting to believe those stories, if that makes sense. And there's so much to be fearful of as a parent. This is not the easiest time in which to be raising children. So that's already there. I'm a person who was kind of stuck, and I wasn't seeing those patterns for myself. So I didn't realize that I was not helping myself by telling myself these stories. I had some weird sort of calculus like, oh, if I picture the worst case scenario, then it won't happen, or then I'll be prepared for it, which is also incorrect.
So then somehow I can control it, or I can prevent it.
Correct. It really did come down to control for me. And my husband will for sure tell you I'm a control freak, but I will say I'm super easygoing. So we won't listen to what he has to say. But I'm in this place. I have the panic attack. And the two keys for me really were medication and therapy. And I went to the therapist first, and I really opened Pandora's box when I did that, because I had pushed so many feelings down and so much that when I went to see her, things got worse. And for me physically, after the panic attack, I was sort of on an anxiety ride where I felt a mid to high level anxiety all the time. And I felt like a switch had been thrown that I couldn't get into the off position. So then when I went to therapy, and I had gone to therapy when I was younger, I knew how it worked. I understood it wasn't, I go one time and then you're all set. But I think when I went, I was unprepared that it was going to feel like I was getting closer to the problem and not farther away from it. So then I saw my PA, and that was when he said, I think you are anxious, yes, but you're also depressed because you are a resilient person. You're used to being able to get yourself out of a funk. You're not able to do that here, and it's making you anxious. So that was the beginning. But then the next year was really talking in therapy about these patterns that I had developed. But then the other huge piece was reclaiming joy. I didn't do anything just for the fun of it before this happened. Everything had a purpose. I mean, I was an absolute productivity machine. The amount that I could hammer out in a day was really impressive and not healthy. But it's amazing how you can avoid that way, right? I think our culture doesn't do a good job of helping us with that. We reward productivity. We want to feel like we're getting things done. So it's not in itself a bad thing. But when I was in a precarious place emotionally and mentally, then it becomes a real problem. So I basically overworked myself into this burned out, depressed state. And then it had to be slow steps back to joy. I started exercising again. I had to get back to figuring out when I was hungry because I had really stopped eating a lot. And then the anxiety sort of descended and that got worse. And so just all of these pieces that once I started paying attention, things slowly got better. Also, a big part of that was communicating with my husband because he traveled and sort of, I had gotten into this mode of, well, he does this and I do everything else. And I had stopped saying, this is hard, this is upsetting because he's traveling, there's nothing he can do. But that doesn't invalidate my feelings. It doesn't mean that I don't need a place to talk about those things or process them in some way. So hopefully that answers your question. It was all these small little steps. And at the beginning, it was so basic. I mean, it was drink enough water during the day. Looking back at it now, when things were so acute, but now those are things I still do today, is paying attention to what I need, where I'm starting to feel tight or amped up, and then what I can do to relieve that pressure. And often it is not in my to-do list, even though that's still my first go-to.
I'm sure moms listening, people listening can relate to.
I hope so. When we talk about how we got to the book, my principal at the time said, I told her, this isn't really just my story. This is something that happens to a lot of women. I understand that now. This was about a year later. And she said, well, that's what you should write your book about. And so that was the beginnings of it. And seeing some of the early reception where people say, this is a book I could have written, or this is my life. There's such a validation to that. And I hope that this book can be a friend to other caregivers, just humans. These are the most human parts of me. And I hope that in sharing that, that other people see their own humanness and have space to care for it.
Yeah. And part of my work as a coach, so I do executive coaching, career coaching, it's all kind of really life coaching.
Yes.
We work on together in coaching is like creating evidence that we're starting to become a new person. And so like you drinking the water, that was your goal. Okay. Now I'm a person who drinks water. Okay.
Yes.
I take care of myself. There's evidence because I drink water. And then you started layering more and more. But sometimes when we're in a deep funk, we can't see our way out of it. You asked for support, therapy, start talking to your husband. Even those things that maybe to you now might seem obvious are not obvious when we're in that funk.
They absolutely were not. And I remember after the panic attack, when I finally told my best buddy about it, she said, Julie, why didn't you call me? I mean, she lives one street over and she said, I would have come over. But at the time, that didn't occur to me. And you're exactly right. You don't have access to that sort of perspective when you are feeling low. And so that's the other thing too, that my PA had said to me at the time. He said, that's why therapy will be so important for you because you need to figure out how you got here because then you'll know what to do sooner. And I love the way you put that though, looking for evidence that you're becoming a new person. And especially when you're working your way out of a low place, that is so key, because I know for me, I was really afraid that I was backsliding or that things were going to get worse. And so this idea that, yeah, that's absolutely what I was doing. And it's really what I was doing with the puzzles. I love that. I would take pictures of them too. Like when I go back to that time, I have pictures of all these puzzles because that was evidence that I was caring for myself. I love that. This is a real aha moment for me. I'm so excited to think more about that. I love that.
So part of your self-care was puzzles.
Yes, it's still, I just ordered myself a little puzzle board. This is just an example. We live in a very small house. My husband is a relentless minimalist who's out to ruin my life. And I am a person who believes I cannot own too many books. So we are somewhat incompatible in that way. So puzzles had become this thing I had let go by the wayside because no one else in my family enjoys them. And it also would kind of be annoying because they would be out on the table and Mondo likes things put away. And of course, now I know that they have like cool little boards and stuff. But also I wasn't creating any sort of time for that. So puzzles were they were a perfect thing for me specifically because it kept my mind just busy enough so that I wasn't worrying as much. And it still got a little start and finish built into it. So for a lot of people, it's coloring things, but it also has a good mindfulness element because you do have to pay attention. So yes, and just kind of take the edge off. So I remember when I decided I was going to go back to my first yoga class, I was working on a puzzle. And so it really did.
Interesting.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? I remember
thoughts were coming to you as you were working on.
Yes, very much so. And I find that even now because there's something, I can really go deep into the nerdy metaphors about puzzles, but there's something about puzzles, especially a really challenging one. You will look at a piece and you have no idea where it's going to go until you're ready for it. And then you think, that's where it goes.
Ooh, that's deep.
I was doing this crazy puzzle the other day that I was like, why did someone give this to me? They don't like me at all. But it was for that reason. I thought, okay, I know this goes somewhere, but I won't know where until I know. And there's no way I can fast forward. So that for me was really, it's still profound. I still think about that. And I love that you also are enjoying this thought and not.
That's a great metaphor.
Right? I haven't told anyone yet because I was going to say it to my kids and I was like, no, this will be wasted on my teenagers. Say something.
All of this wisdom.
Exactly. Yes, I have to save it. So I'm so excited.
No, that's beautiful. You hear something and it kind of just passes you by. You don't grasp it. But then you hear it again a year later and then wow, I just got that. I just understood that.
You know where to put that piece now.
Yeah. That piece of information, that wisdom, that little nugget.
Yes.
You weren't ready for it. We weren't ready for that information, but now we are. Beautiful. I like it.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. It really did. I was like, wow, this is exactly what it is. And it's been very true with my book process and how that has come into me becoming, I'm using air quotes, a writer or becoming someone who thinks of myself as an author and writer. It's the same pieces where so many things I didn't know and now I know them and now I can put them in their right places. But you start off just with a mess. A puzzle is a mess in the beginning.
But they keep coming. The metaphors.
I'm just a metaphor machine today. Here I come.
Good. That is really good. You need to write about that. I
have been noodling something on puzzles, so this is making me excited to actually.
Well, I kind of want to go out and buy a puzzle because I don't buy them because I think now, I don't have time for that. I don't have it, but it's a waste of time, right? Because the productivity thing is a thing for me too. And what I just was thinking about as you were talking about puzzles, I had my own aha moment was I've always heard people talk about how when we're under stress, obviously meditation, but doing things that are meditative. So I think Michelle Obama talked about knitting. She turned to knitting during COVID. And it's like things that use our hands or that use our body or even prayer, Catholic. So the rosary is like a meditative thing. So as you were talking, I was like, ooh, interesting. You have to focus when you're doing a puzzle.
Yep.
And then even though you're focused, your brain can still kind of think. And so you said you received, I should start doing yoga. Oh, interesting. There's a book by Julia Cameron called The Walking Path. I think it's called The Walking Path.
Didn't she write The Artist's Way as well? Okay. I have not read The Walking Path. Interesting. Go ahead.
Yes. And so she talks about going on walks, not with any music, just and listening to the sounds on your walk, the things you see, because you're more present. And as you're walking, you're almost like receiving messages too of things you need to do, of like the thought, the creativity comes to you as you're walking, as you're in your body, walking and being present.
Yes.
And so I just thought, ooh, that's kind of like your version of walking is the puzzles.
It is. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because so much for me was reintegrating these parts of me. And the movement piece was also a big part of it, getting back to exercise and getting back to being in my body. And puzzles are something that sort of has me in both. And you're exactly right. Like just enough to kind of take the edge off to that busy mind. But you're right. It is a meditative, mindful experience for me until I ruin it by being a psycho and trying to finish it too fast. But I get really close.
But then you're aware you're doing that.
Yes, I see a lot of it. But yeah, I'll be excited for you to read the book, because there's a lot about the puzzles in there.
Good.
And what I was doing at that time. And I'll just tell you a slice of it so that people will know. But my son wears glasses, and he's never had to do patching, which is like the worst thing I think that children with glasses have to do. So they have to wear a patch over one eye if one eye tends to work harder than the other, because they're trying to force the weaker eye to start working again. And for me, that is what I was doing when I was puzzling. I was trying to reconnect those pathways. So I think things that bring us back to ourselves in those quieter ways, that's really good. I'm going to pick up that Julia Cameron book too. I still haven't read The Artist's Way either. I need to put it on my list.
I never finished The Artist's Way, but what I got from The Artist's Way was the morning pages, which I still do today, which I love morning pages. And so for those listening, morning pages, I recommend to all my clients is in the morning, you brain dump 3 pages worth of your thoughts. Everything that doesn't have to make sense. It's just anything that comes to mind, put it on paper. And a silly metaphor is like, you don't go back and read it. And the metaphor I use, it's like as if you were using a tissue. You just use a tissue and throw it away, right? You just write it and let it go. And for me, I've noticed that my most creative times, the times where I've been kind of my best self, is when I've been focused on writing morning pages every day.
Interesting. This is inspiring to me, because I read about it every time and I'm like, oh, that's neat. And then I don't.
It's really cool. You start with all of your anxiety, and then by
anxiety, I don't have that.
You're cured. You are cured.
I don't know what you're talking about. Okay, continue. You start with that.
All of the thoughts. I'm worried. Oh, I forgot to take out the trash can. Oh, I forgot to do this. All the things. Just write it down. And then by the end, you start feeling hopeful. And that's why it's important to do it in the morning, because you start thinking about, well, maybe I could reach out to that one person. And also, she says that you can only write about something for so many days before you're moved to do something about it. And so,
yes,
because you see what you're worried about, you see what you're thinking about. One silly example was I had a pen I was writing next to my notebook. I alternate between online and written. And it was really annoying pen. In my journal, I was writing in the morning pages, oh, I hate this pen. I need to get another one tomorrow. The next day, I'm like writing and I'm like, oh, this pen is awful. I'll get it next time. On the third day, I was just about to write the thought. And I said, nope, gonna go get another pen right this second. And I did. So I cannot keep writing about this pen because I don't want to get up and go get another pen.
I love that story. How true is that too? I love that idea that, you're actually recognizing and moving yourself to do something about it. And I also think that you and I might be kindred spirits, because just listening to you say like, this is a bad pen, that's the worst thing that can happen to me in a day. Like if I'm writing a thank you note and the pen is crappy, I'm like, well, let's just throw it away. I mean, might as well not send it at this point. This is garbage. Yeah.
My husband likes certain pens and they're the worst. The worst. And my kids had left one here, and that was the only one I had to write my client notes that day. My pens walk away with my kids. And I was so upset. I was like, I can't believe this is the worst pen. I can't be a good coach with this pen.
It's so true. This pen says something about me, and it's not saying anything good. I don't like it. Yeah.
Well, tell me, Julie. So you were going through this process, drinking more water, taking care of yourself, yoga. By the way, in client conversations, these are the things that people want to do. We walk through the ideal day and people say, I would just want to go to yoga during my lunch break. I want to go out for a walk because I sit at my desk all day. These are very real things that people listening are thinking, right?
So of course.
You go through this process. When do you get the courage? When do you have the aha? I need to go for it and put this proposal out there. Write this book. Do you write the book for yourself and then say, I'm going to get it published? Because that takes a lot of courage.
Well, I appreciate that. I think I didn't know enough to be nervous. Honestly, like I was just so silly and innocent, and that can be a great place to be. I think that's a gift I've given myself maybe in the last 5 years or so since writing this book is it's okay to suck at something for a while. That's how you start. You know, what's so funny about the timing of our conversation is that I was just in my Google Docs, which I have a very tough relationship with Google Docs, but I had a document in there that is titled, I feel weird calling this a book. And I think I sent it to my sister at the time. So I think I started by writing, I wrote everything down. She was really the only one I shared it with in the beginning. Things felt very tender. So I think that's important for anyone really with any creative endeavor, or sometimes even when you're starting something. Like when I went back to yoga, I went to a studio where I didn't know anyone. Because sometimes anonymity can be a gift a little bit in certain, like, hey, I can do this and it doesn't have to feel risky. So I didn't show it to anybody. And then in February, I went to a class called The Path to Publishing. And it was at Book Passage, which is across the river. And I was driving home. And after all these like abysmal statistics about, oh, you want to write a book? Good luck. So I listened to all this and I'm driving home and I had the thought, this has to matter to me. So does it matter to me? And I thought, it does. Okay. So I called a coach and sent her the manuscript. And again, I'm using air quotes because it was not a manuscript. It was what eventually she was like, this is not a book. It is source material. So then she helped me over 2020 when we were in lockdown anyway, but she helped me reshape it into a manuscript. So it had a title. It was actually going to be published by a hybrid publisher. And in the course of my publicity efforts for that, I met Zibby, who is now my publisher, and she was starting her company right at that time. And I was in a contract moment where I could move without jamming anything up too much. Yep, exactly. And so I moved to them. But then after that, I still wrote 3 more drafts of this book. It has had many lives. So I've learned so much by doing that. So I think when I say I was innocent in it, number one, I'm a book lover, but I had no idea what goes into making a book. I had never taken a creative writing class. I didn't know anything. And that was a gift because I think had I known every step, I probably would have been too intimidated to try. So I didn't know what I was doing, but also I don't think I really thought through the whole I'm putting my life out on paper thing. So I don't know that I'll write another memoir, mostly because I don't think I have the story for it. But the reason I felt so passionately about this one is that I really do think this can be of service to someone. I think it can help someone maybe avoid the trap that I so happily skipped into. So if it can do that, then it will be worth it. And luckily, I've had enough time and plenty of editors and eyes on it for people to say, this is what should be included, this is not. And that has been a huge gift. But I think the courageous part is more the ignorant part where I was like, well, this will all work out. My husband says that my life motto is shoot, aim, ready. And that's about right. I'm like, well, we'll just figure it out. And I'm getting more that way as I age. I'm just, it's fine.
That's great because that's how you get yourself to get started.
Correct. And for an overthinker to get over that hump, I mean, for all the overthinkers that are listening right now,
that's huge.
You can get there. Like you can
that's huge.
Start to train yourself to think less and do more, especially if it's something that's going to bring you joy. I mean, this is a dream come true, whether it's a puzzle or a book or just taking one step toward who you want to become. What a gift.
What are maybe a few things you learned about yourself through that process?
Through the process of making the book. I'm very coachable, so that's a good thing. I can, in some ways, though, be too coachable. So I didn't have a good handle on my own voice. So I think that's the main thing. I learned what my writing voice is and where some of my sweet spots are. I'm still working on that, obviously, because I think that's a lifelong thing for any creative or writer. So learning my writing voice, I think learning to accept failure as part of the process, to befriend rejection. There's a file in my emails file folder called That's a No From Us, because I thought it was fun to put stuff in there. So every time I get a rejection, I drag it over.
I love that.
And it is actually really satisfying. It was a good thing to think, okay, this is getting somewhere too. right? Not just, oh, I'm deleting that and that's a bad thing. I mean, I had plenty of rejections on all sides. I still do. So I think that has been a really good thing to learn. But I think the best thing that I've learned about myself, the part that makes me most joyful, is that I have more grit than I thought. That I have the chops, and I don't mean talent. I mean that I have the grit and the ambition to keep going and to say, I didn't come this far to come this far and try again. And so that has been a really neat part of myself to know in this season of life. So, because I never thought of myself as ambitious. And now to kind of claim that part of myself and go, this is a good part of me. And I like where it takes me. And it's not necessarily as tied to the productivity piece. So I think I had those confused for a long time. So just, it's a constant untangling. I think learning about yourself is such a lifelong experience, and it really can take you to places you didn't expect.
Oh, I love that. Well, tell us, Julie. So you mentioned you're writing a novel.
Yes.
What else is next for you? So you're still at the library. You're still a librarian.
Yes. I'm doing far too many things at once still all the time. I've learned no lessons about that. But hey, you can't do everything. But yeah, I'm still at the library, which I love. And I think it's such a good reminder too for people, because I think sometimes when people make a big life shift or a big career shift, you see it as one and then the other. But things are always in flux, right? Like, and you're just sort of tiptoeing your way toward whatever your next stop is. And so I think that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm still in the library. I am obviously doing the publicity for this book and then working on the novel. I am trying to stop myself from volunteering for things. And that has been a good lesson, because I think it's just constant. But yeah, for the most part, I'm just trying to be where my feet are. And that is a challenging thing sometimes with writing, but then also with the publicity stuff. But thankfully, I have a couple weeks off to do this next phase. But I still do love being in the library, although it has become increasingly strange. Like, I'm having an adult conversation with you, and then in 3 weeks' time, I will be telling someone to please stop picking their nose while I'm reading Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. Thank you very much. So it's just these bizarre
I bet you're
parts.
amazing, though.
Oh, I love reading aloud, and I love the kids. They put a lot of life in my life, so it would be way more boring without them, but also quieter. Sometimes I do, when they leave the library, I'm like, oh, good. I have it back.
Peace.
Exactly.
Well, tell us, where can people find your book? Where can people learn more about you? Tell us all the things.
I have a website, which is juliewriteswords.com. My Instagram is juliewriteswords. I'm most active there because I can only handle so much with social media, and I'm trying to just accept that I can only do one platform. So Instagram is where you'll find me most. And the book will be out everywhere on January 9th. You can listen to it on audio. I got to record the audiobook, which was wonderful. And so if you'd like to hear me read it to you, just like I do in the library, I will happily do that for a small fee from Libro FM or Audible or Apple Books, and then, or whatever other place. But you can get the book anywhere books are sold now.
Awesome. I can't wait to read it.
I'm so thankful. Thanks for having me today. This conversation was a joy.
Oh my God. Same. This is so much fun. Thank you for being here.